Okay, so it's January 2021, and as COVID lockdown travel restrictions continue here in the UK, we're going to make a video to look at how you can recover your Mazda MX-5 if it has a flat battery. So we're going to look specifically at the Mark 1s and the Mark 2 MX-5s, so that's known as the NA or the NB or the Miata in some markets. So that's all years through to 2005 year models. So we are going to, during the course of this video, we're going to take a look at recovering your battery using maintenance or smart chargers, which would be the preferred recovery route. And then we will also look at emergency roadside assistance techniques, such as the modern Lithium Ion Boost Packs, which would be preferable to traditional jump leads. And we will highlight the dangers of these traditional jump leads, which would have been recommended originally in the manual back in 2005, but the world has changed since then, and some of the other cars on the road now have smart alternators, so we just need to be aware of that if we're using this traditional technology. So that's what we'll run through in this video. Now, as you're web searching jump starting techniques, we'll start with the assumption that you are in a breakdown situation and this is an emergency technique. And so we'll start by showing you the roadside techniques. What we would highlight, however, is, as you can see here in the owner's manual from 2005, these are referred to as emergency starting techniques. So they should really be viewed as get you out of jail if you are at the roadside and in a dangerous or vulnerable location. If your car has just the battery's just gone flat at home, and it's not an emergency situation, and you have time and other alternative methods to recover the vehicle, it would be highly preferable to use one of those other techniques, which we'll come on to talk about later in the video. But just be aware this is emergency. For emergency situations, it will restart the car. It's clearly here in the manual. However, it may not be the best for the long-term health of your battery, and there are certain risks associated with using these techniques, as we'll come on to highlight. Okay, so the first technique we're going to look at is the emergency starting technique you'll find described in the MX-5's manual. And we'll put that up on screen so you can see that in more detail. And this uses jumper leads. What is important to remember is this manual was written, so this car is a 2005 car, the manual would have been written in the early 2000s. And at that time, the other cars you would meet on the road would all have similar alternators with an output limited to somewhere around 14.4 volts. We're now in 2021 and the world has changed significantly. And so a lot of the cars you meet on the road and maybe reaching out to for a boost start may have smart variable voltage output alternators, smart alternators. Now generally these alternators are designed to reduce the voltage output at times when it's not needed. However, in extreme situations, it can be pumping out voltages somewhere near 18 volts rather than 14.5. So that in itself increases the risk of this technique, which was once a favoured technique. So in the first instance, be very aware of the vehicle you're seeking help from. If you can get an older vehicle with a conventional alternator, that's probably preferable than a more modern vehicle. And then the first thing you must do is ensure that the keys are removed from both vehicles and that all electrical components, all electrical items, so wiper motors, washers, heated screens, all of those things are turned off in both cars, and that you've unplugged anything that would be in the USB or cigarette lighters, so any phone charging, anything like that, switch all of that off from the cars. Okay, so the first thing to do is to access the battery, which in both the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 are located in the boot. Now, if your battery is completely flat, you'll have to release it with the manual release in the center console. Here we can use it with the key release. And then you'll need to move the carpet back to gain access to the battery, which will be located in this area. And this is one of the original factory fit Panasonic gel batteries that you see in this car. Now on all of these cars, the positive and negative terminals weren't particularly clearly marked, and as you can see on my battery, I've actually put some red electrician's tape to make it much more obvious, because it is crucially important that you get the correct terminals to connect to. If you connect it the wrong way around, you can do serious damage. So it's well worth taking the time, if your battery isn't flat, just to take the time in daylight to identify which is the positive and which is the negative, and then make some red marking with the positive one to make it very clear, because invariably these sort of breakdowns happen on dark, rainy nights when you've been using a lot of electrical components. The other thing to notice is these batteries should be vented. Really important, given their boot location and the potential for gases to build up. They should have these vent hoses connected, which then vent any hydrogen or hydrogen sulfide gas to the outside of the car. So just a couple of points to be aware there. But so having identified where the red post is, the fitting sequence as detailed in the Mazda handbook, which we'll put up on screen now, is a pretty standard fitting sequence, and there's a little rhyme to help us remember it. It's red on dead and black will crack. So essentially you start at the red terminal of the battery with the car with the dead battery, and then you follow that red lead to the donor car and connect the red terminal, and then the black, and then finally making the final connection back here at the dead car. So let's just go ahead and do that. So taking our red jumper lead, it's red on dead, make a good contact there, and then we follow the end of our red jumper lead over here to our donor car. And as you can see, this car is from 2009, so a few years older than the Mazda. But this has a traditional alternator, so this doesn't have stop-start technology, and it doesn't have a smart alternator. So this would be the type of vehicle you're looking for. And again, there you can see we've marked very clearly this battery, so it's red terminal. So again, you make a connection of the red lead to that, directly to that red terminal. And then we take the black lead and connect that to the black terminal. It can often be a bit tricky to get in, as you can see there. So make sure they're firmly connected. We then follow the other end of the black lead and take that back to the battery with the dead vehicle. So if you remember the rhyme, it was red on dead and black will crack. And what that means is the crack is an electrical spark you're likely to get when you make this final connection. And so that's a little reminder that you don't want to be connecting to the negative post here right next to the battery, because if you create a spark in this environment, and particularly in a boot environment, if hydrogen gas has built up and you create a spark, that will explode, which is obviously not a good place to be, hence why we're wearing safety goggles. So the recommended location on this this Mazda is actually on this boot latch catch, which, as you can see with the carpet and modern large cables, is pretty tricky, so you will have to force that back. There's some little plastic clips to remove, and then you can make the connection like that. So that is the leads connected in the correct sequence, and on this one, this particular set of jumper leads, you can see we get a red light confirming that we have made a good connection. The advice in the handbook would then be to start the donor car's engine and to leave this running just at a fast idle, so maybe 1500 RPM, no more than that, but just leave it running at a fast idle for a few minutes to allow charge to go back into the dead battery. So at this point, the alternator from this car is feeding charge into the dead battery, and you want to, depending on how flat it is, you want to give it a reasonable time so the battery isn't completely dead when you're trying to start it. And then, as you can see from the handbook's advice, you would then start the MX-5. So both vehicles are then running at the same time. and then you would look to very carefully remove the leads in the reverse of that process. So we start with the black lead on the boot catch, come back over to our donor car and remove the black lead from that one, keeping them all separate. You remove the red lead, and then finally we remove the red lead from the Mazda. Now at this point the car will have started. The Mazda's alternator now is trying to put charge back into it, but depending on how depleted your battery was, what you've got to remember is that battery could still be in a very low state of charge. So before you set off and drive the vehicle anywhere, it's good practice to leave it for maybe 20 minutes just at a fast idle. So sit in the car just idling it again, maybe 1500 RPM, something like that, to give the battery time to get a little bit of charge back into it. Otherwise, if you set off and stall at the first junction you come to, you may not have enough charge in the battery to restart the car. So it's a good idea to leave it idling at a fast idle, static, and then take the car for at least 30-minute drive, but more would be preferable. And that will put some charge back into your battery. But then, having done that, you really want to be getting the battery properly charged and properly checked following that breakdown. Okay, so in terms of selecting suitable donor vehicles, if you are going to undertake a jump start using traditional jumper leads, an earlier car like this, so this is from about 2009, doesn't have stop-start technology, doesn't have a smart alternator, would be preferable to a more modern car. This 2019 car does have stop-start technology. As a result, it has a smart alternator with variable outputs. And a good way to check that is on the battery. You'll normally have some sort of electronic monitoring on the negative post and an additional lead, which sort of is a good clue that it's got a smart alternator. And in certain situations, this particular smart alternator on this car could put out anything up to 18 volts. Which is far beyond what the Mazda was ever designed to have. That sort of tops out at about 14.5, 15 volts. Okay, so the next type of emergency roadside breakdown recovery method, which is preferable really to traditional jump leads, would be to use a lithium ion boost pack. Such as this one. The lithium ion ones now are very compact in size. The other benefit of lithium ion battery technology is it retains its charge, so it can sit for many months in the boot of your car and will retain reasonably full charge and be ready when you need it. It obviously removes the need for finding another car and removes the risk of damaging that car or your own car. So this would be a preferred emergency solution, depending on how dead your battery is. So again, we start simply by removing the carpet. And the cover, and identifying where the positive and the negative lead is, the red and the black. And this unit actually has a little torch on the end there, so to help you, which is very convenient for identifying where those terminals are. But as we said previously, it's a very good idea to have used some electrician's tape or some red nail varnish or paint just to mark the red post. And we then gain access to this. And the instructions on this particular one, as I say, you must obviously take guidance from the specific instructions on your specific unit. But this one is spark-free technology. So in theory, it cannot generate a spark to ignite gas, explosive gas. What I would say to that point, given the location of this battery in a boot well, where hydrogen sulfide gas is dense and can build up in the bottom there if it's not properly vented, it would be very good practice to leave the boot open for some time to allow any gas to vent before starting this process. And also, if there is any smell of rotten eggs, which would indicate hydrogen sulfide from overcharging. If you get any smell of rotten eggs, don't attempt this procedure. Similarly, if the battery is leaking or showing any signs of fluid coming out of it, don't attempt the procedure. But assuming the battery appears in good condition, you would simply remove the terminal cover, and in the same process, red on dead. So red first, followed by the black clip directly to the battery terminal. and then once we're happy it's connected, we would push this button and the lights will start scrolling and we get the white boost light, and you can probably hear the unit clicking. That is all an indication that we have a good connection. And at this point you could simply get in the car and turn the key and start it in the normal way. You would then come back, switch the unit off and remove it as soon as the engine has started, and then the car's alternator is once again putting charge back into the battery. But depending on how flat your battery is, that is giving the alternator a hard time. So it's not good practice. As I say, both of these techniques are emergency, get you out of jail techniques, not techniques you should be using at home when your battery's just gone flat over the winter, in which case you should really be using an alternative technique if you care about the longevity of your battery. Okay, so we've had a look at two emergency roadside boost starting techniques, but if you are at your home location and your battery has just gone flat over the winter or during COVID lockdown, it is far preferable if you can get an extension lead, a mains extension lead to the vehicle, to use a gentle smart charger of this type. So the accumate would be very well suited. As you can see from the packaging here, this is suitable for gel batteries, which is what the original Panasonic batteries fitted to the MX-5s are. They're a lead acid gel variety, and as it explains on the back of the packaging here, this charges at a very low amperage. So you will need to leave this on for many hours, 24 hours or more. But the great thing about this particular device is it's fully automatic. So it monitors the charge level from the battery and it switches it off and goes into just a monitoring cycle once it has reached full charge. So it really is a fit and forget item, and is great not only for recovery but for maintenance situations. So really, if you don't use your vehicle through the winter, it's highly worth investing in one of these rather than letting your battery deteriorate and having to replace the battery. It's an effective cost saving. So fitting is very straightforward. As before, you have a red and a black lead. So we've identified the red post, you clip that on there, and similarly you clip the black on there. Best to remove the actual charging unit from the boot space, and obviously protect it from any rain or any water. But then, as you can see, we're simply plugging that in to a main supply. Having first selected the 12-volt supply, and as you can see, the battery is currently somewhat depleted, and when it's fully charged, that amber light flicks across to a green light there, and it will sit there at green, just monitoring your battery until such time as you need to drive the car. If you're going to use it as a maintenance device, the kit also comes with a fly lead. So instead of using these crocodile clips, you can permanently collect a fly lead, which we have here, and that then means you don't have to remove your carpet each time you want to charge it. You simply plug the connector in, and it's got a square and a round connector, so there's no way you can connect it the wrong way around, reverse polarity, and that makes it very simple for maintenance connection over the winter months. So that would be the accumate. So as we said, the accumate is very well suited to the original Panasonic gel battery that was fitted to the early MX-5s. And the technology is tried and tested on this age of battery and car technology, so very well suited to that. There are other brands available. C-Tech is another very, very good brand, and makes fully automated chargers, which again monitor the charge going into the battery and adjust the charging input accordingly and keep it controlled. Some of the cheaper battery maintainers you'll find that you can see at cheap price, they will just put a constant charge on the battery and they won't switch off when it's fully charged, so they end up doing damage to the battery in long-term storage. So if you're going to invest in one at all, get something of this nature to avoid damaging the battery, rather than doing, you'll do more harm than good. But as a general principle, batteries like to be maintained at full charge, so using a maintenance charger through the winter will extend the life of your battery, avoid the need for high-risk boost starting, and so in the long run, a small investment in one of these devices will actually save you money by making your battery last longer. These Panasonic batteries, the original ones, are absolutely fantastic. I mean, this car is, where are we now, 15, 16 years old, 70,000 miles, 70,000 miles on it, and it's still on its original Panasonic battery. So if you look after them and don't let them fully deplete, they will go on a long time. So the original Panasonic batteries are still available. They are at the moment, they can be purchased for somewhere just over £100. And so if you invest in that and the equipment to look after it properly, you can get many, many years out of it. Okay, so if your battery has been depleted and is damaged beyond repair, you will then need to obviously think about replacing it. Now, the original Panasonic gel batteries, which were fitted to the early MX-5s, are still available. They cost just over £100, but they are, if they're maintained, they are incredibly durable. So the gel nature of them makes them more resilient to deep cycle discharging. So batteries normally like to be well charged, and as does a gel battery, but they are slightly more resilient than a flooded lead acid battery to going down to a deeper state of discharge, which may happen over a winter lockdown period. The other key thing to note is they have these, the MX-5, you should have these vent tubes on, which plug to both sides of the battery and then exit under the bottom of the car, just to allow any build-up of gases, so hydrogen gas or hydrogen sulfide from overcharging. They allow those gases to exit the confined space of the boot to reduce the risk of any explosion. And they also, those the hydrogen sulfide is a corrosive gas, so can cause the boot floor to rot out. So really important that you check these pipes are present and properly connected to the battery. So as I say, the Panasonic gel battery original will cost slightly over £100 to replace. A lot of people look, particularly on the Mark 1s, look to swap them out with a different size of flooded lead acid battery because they're cheaper. They are typically more difficult to mount, and so you'll see a lot of the early Mark 1s with damage to the side wings where the batteries come loose and thumped against it and put dents in the car. You can actually get a Mazda components fitting kit if you want to go that route and have an 063 size flooded battery in there. You can get Mazda components, larger tray and larger clamps for the Mark 1, and those are available. But by the time you've bought that kit, which is about £40, and your cheaper battery, you're almost up to the price of the original Panasonic. So my personal preference would be to stick with the original, get a decent charger and look after that battery, and it should last you many, many years. Okay, so at the end of the summer COVID lockdown, a friend of mine with a Mark 1 MX-5 gave me a call and said he'd tried to jump start it using jumper leads and he'd been unsuccessful. Now, I'm not entirely sure what he did. I think there were probably three possible options. I think he'd either connected the leads the wrong way round, so the red to negative, and caused problems there. Alternatively, the battery may have been just so depleted that it was damaged and shorting out internally, so when he went to boost start, that caused problems. It was a dead short effectively. Or the third option, maybe he was using a smart alternator and got a voltage spike. But whatever the cause, he wasn't in a good place, so I went to help and try and see if I could figure it out for him. I was reasonably new to MX-5, so I had to do a little bit of digging around. But what we were able to identify in his fuse box here was that his failed jump start had blown the main fuse. Now, this is a Mark II. I believe on his Mark I it was a black fuse, and I think that was 90 amps. And on this one it's a blue fuse and it's 100 amps, but it's a huge amperage to have actually blown. So you can see the currents involved in jump and boost starting. What we discovered is that this fuse is actually secured by a little bolt on either side. So if we just shine a torch in there, I'm hoping you can see that. So it necessitated just releasing the fuse box to gain access to the bolts on both sides, and then you just had to undo those little bolts. The fuse itself was only £5, but obviously if you've been paying for the labour, it could have all added up. But fortunately he got away with that, and that was the only damage to his car. The fuse stopped it, but I would say he was very lucky. Other people, as you'll see on many of the forums, have been unlucky. And the fuse won't have blown in time, and damage to other electronic components will occur. So as we said at the start of this video, view boost starting of any description as a get you out of jail emergency situation, as it was always intended in the Mazda manual. If it's at all possible to get a trickle charger to the vehicle, or alternatively take the battery out of the vehicle, take it to the charger and then bring it back, would be a far safer solution. So good luck with that. Hope it goes well for you. Okay, and now just for comparison, we'll repeat that cold start on the MX-5 Mark II Miata. And just monitor the alternator output. So we're showing a fully charged battery at 12.6 volts. Car started, so I'll put that across to alternator, and as you can see, the little MX-5 alternator is actually pushing out 14.7 volts at the moment. Is remaining reasonably constant as we raise the engine revs, just about 2,000 revs there. That's holding nice and steady.